section for impulse control disorder. ठीक है ना? Control disorder, what is it? How do you classify impulse control disorder? हम कर चुके हैं, we talked about it. Kleptomania, pyromania, and gambling disorder. And we have talked about the case as 7 questionnaire. All right. One thing we can discuss is a model answer. ठीक है? I have gotten an answer, ठीक है, by Hanima. She has submitted this homework. Uh, is a question from paper 3. Obviously, paper 3 is going to ask you for summary of the studies that you're going to study, and uske alawa, right after what you summarize, you're going to have to do the evaluation part. So she has submitted the evaluation part. The reason why I'm discussing it over here because it is a very, very good answer. है कुछ थोड़ी बहुत चीजें lacking है, but basic question is you have studied Proust, you have studied Freud, and you studied Leonardo, and they all have the theories of why people develop phobias, right? Over here, we're not asking summaries. Over here, we're asking to evaluate them. And this question in exam, if it comes, हमेशा 10 mark का होता है. So you're supposed to write 4 evaluation points. So I want 4 different paragraphs. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs, right? So yeah, as an examiner, I'm checking hundreds of people questions. As an examiner, I want the organization, I want it to ease my eyes, say, this is very easy on the eyes. Next thing, what are each paragraph should be about? See, she should not make one paragraph according to Woos, then the next paragraph by Freud, then the next paragraph by Leonardo. She's supposed to write the evaluation point according to the debates. So she says the biology paragraph is about nature and nurture. दूसरा paragraph is about free will determinism. तीसरा individual situational. Fourth is going to be reductionist holistic. So she is going issue by issue. That's a very good organization as well. Freud की spelling गलत है, इसको सही कर देना. And in the nature nurture debate, she's going to explain why is Oost either nature or nurture, giving her the reason. Using content by Oost. Freud के बारे में भी nature nurture कौन से side पे जाता है, given content by Freud. And Leonardo का भी ये scene है, she's going to quote the content by Leonardo. So we're going to take a quick look at it, how she has done it. Nature nurture debate, ठीक है ना? These are given by Freud and Leonardo. ठीक है ना? Freud and Leonardo fall into the nurture. And now she's going to tell us why. She's not going to leave at it. So Freud कहता है कि भाई phobia comes from childhood experiences. All right, we'll start. Then she's going to elaborate किस तरह childhood experience के अंदर क्या होता है. She's going to tell it. Events होते हैं जिसके अंदर psychosexual stages के अंदर आते हैं. This is very, very good क्योंकि she used Freud's evidence to quote why is Freud's nature. क्योंकि कहते हैं childhood experiences कौन से आते हैं particularly. She said कि ये वाले childhood experiences आते हैं. Using correct terminology. So this is completely fine. This shows कि nurture की तरफ आता है. Same with Leonardo. Leonardo के experiments के बारे में इसने कुछ ना कुछ highlight किया होगा, and she tells के Leonardo के experiment के अंदर किस तरह बंदे को phobia acquired हुआ है rather than natural. Same for Oost on the other hand, ठीक है ना? Oost is nature side. क्यों? क्योंकि genetics का role हुआ था. So that's why she states that Oost is nature rather than nurture. One thing Halima has done यहाँ पे थोड़ा बहुत गड़बड़ is, and थोड़ा बहुत क्या कहते हैं, you shouldn't do that, ठीक है ना? ये जो research है ना, Oost et al के नाम से होगा, Leonardo et al के नाम से होगा. My किताब के अंदर Freud is just Freud. When you write the evaluation, you write the evaluation of the researches. Understand what I'm saying? You're not supposed to evaluate the person. So yeah, फर्क क्या है? Oost in his right sides determinism. Oost is not siding with determinism. Oost की study sides with determinism, right? So whenever you write this, make sure कि Oost et al. Fla date लिखा होगा, right? 1989, something like that. Oost et al. 1989 sides with determinism. So when you write Oost et al. 1989, इसका मतलब है you're referring to the study. Just by writing Oost, you're targeting the person, and we don't want to target any individual. We want to target the research that they have. So please, the researchers के नाम and date लाजमी याद होने चाहिए. Otherwise, this is not gonna go. So yeah, CI is gonna be very, very critical on this. You're gonna say कि इतना बड़ा मसला नहीं है, but it is बहुत बड़ा मसला क्योंकि now you're targeting the person rather than the researchers, and बंदे ने कुछ नहीं किया. सारा का सारा जो blame है research पे होना चाहिए, target research पे होना चाहिए. So this is a model answer, right? So again, organize your paragraph according to the issues. 4 paragraph, 4 issues. ये इसका issue अलग है, इसका issue अलग है, इसका debate अलग है, इसका debate अलग है. And you're going to tell के ये वाला बंदा इस issue के कौन से side पे जाता है, and you use evidence to support your argument. So that's what she has done, and this is a good answer. So Halima, बाद में please ये A2 वाले main group के अंदर upload करना. हमारी बस ये गलती थी कि तूने at all bracket date नहीं लिखा, यहाँ थोड़ा मसला हो जाता है. Right, so this is a 10-mark question. According to CIE perspective, how much will she get? She's going to get somewhere around 7 and 8. 7 or 8. पहले मार्क किस पे करेगा? ऑब्वियसली जो रिसर्च में थोड़ा सा जो गड़बड़ की है, ठीक है ना. दूसरा मार्क कहाँ पे करेगा? Although she has made sure कि सारी की सारी studies highlighted है और सारी की सारी studies के इसने reasons भी दिए हैं, but I feel कि कुछ ना कुछ जगह थोड़ा और elaborate हो सकता था. For example, Freud का जहाँ पे इसने psychosexual stages, she could have been more specific. Toilet training. So you could have been more specific. So the more specific you are, the more क्या कहते हैं, solidifies your point. The more vague you are, the more it endangers your point. So you could have been more specific in some areas, but otherwise, given the constraint, the context of the exam, time frame बहुत कम होता है, you're supposed to do this for another question. So you know what? Exam के लिहाज से, if it was a real exam, real situation, this is the best answer that she can come up with in that scenario. So good job, Halima. ये जो question है, ठीक है ना, इसको please original group में upload कर देना. Anyways, we're gonna talk about the lecture. So after discussing क्या कहते हैं, what is impulse control disorder and how do you measure it, now we're gonna come on to the causes. Second section of any disorder is going to be the cause. You should know that. So why does it happen? We have the biochemical perspective, first of all. So yeah, and it is good. And biochemical perspective is all going to be about neurotransmitters. कौन से neurotransmitter के यहाँ पे बारे में बात करेंगे? Dopamine. So basically, they say that, you know what, the dopamine is released in your brain, right, when you get pleasure. So whenever you feel pleasure, whenever you feel good, that is all dopamine coming into play. जब अच्छा महसूस होगा, that's dopamine. So naturally, if you feel good once, you wanna feel good again, right? So naturally, you want dopamine again. So what happens is, there's this area in the brain that releases dopamine. It's called the pleasure center. And the pleasure center is called the nucleus accumbens. So yeah. So when you get a hit of dopamine, and when it enters nucleus accumbens, that's when you get the pleasure. So yeah, that's when it happens. So as soon as dopamine enters the nucleus accumbens, you feel pleasure. Naturally, you would want to happen to you again. So what happens is, your brain develops a pathway. Pathway क्या होता है? Develops a connection in the brain. ठीक है? Is there any proof of connection? Yes, memories, right? Memory अगर तुम्हारे दिमाग में है, इसका मतलब है कि दिमाग में कहीं ना कहीं connection बना हुआ that lets you remember that information. So same way, if something gave you pleasure, you're going to remember what gave you pleasure. तो दिमाग में connection solidify हो जाएगा. इसका क्या ताल्लुक है फिर dopamine से? इसका ये ताल्लुक है कि next time you want dopamine, you're going to use that pathway to remember पहले dopamine किससे आया था, and then you're going to repeat that behavior again and again and again. All right. So what happens, simply put, nucleus accumbens is the pleasure center. That's where the magic happens. The first time you get a hit of dopamine, no memories form, क्योंकि पैदा हो गया. पैदा होने के बाद एक pathway बन जाएगा. And what gave you dopamine, वो जो memory है ना, that's gonna get stored in the prefrontal cortex. That's where the memory, that's where the thought process happens, and the memory is gonna be stored in the VTA. VTA में कितना memory store हो जाएगा. If you next time you feel sad, you want dopamine, तुम क्या करोगे? Your brain will remember what gave you dopamine. It's gonna क्या कहते हैं? Use the entire pathway, go to the VTA, find out what gave you dopamine in the first place. Is you're gonna do that behavior. Nucleus accumbens gets the dopamine, right? And prefrontal cortex, you're gonna have a thought process about it. So that's it. That's what creates addiction in people, and that's the entire explanation about the dopamine chemical. That's it. तो इसके लिए कोई official experiment नहीं है, It's all about this brain area तुम्हें याद करना पड़ेगा. You have to remember nucleus accumbens, right? You have to remember it's a pleasure center. ये तुम्हें याद करना पड़ेगा. तो but there is one another unofficial experiment, right, by Vroom. So yeah, this dopamine, right? But you know what? Is it really dopamine, or is there something else at play? So Vroom does a research that he does on people who have Parkinson, right? Parkinson जो बुढ़ापे में लोगों के साथ होता है. Parkinson, everyone knows कि Parkinson के अंदर जो reason होता है is because people have less dopamine. So उनका solution क्या है? You're gonna give them medicine that's going to increase your dopamine, right? Makes sense. कोई चीज करना, you're gonna increase it. So what Vroom does, ठीक है ना, is he gives one group, ठीक है ना, dopamine increasing medicine, and he gives the other group nothing. ठीक है, he doesn't give the other group nothing. So one group will have no medicine, and the other group will have a dopamine increasing medicine. So what happens is, in the results section, जिस group को dopamine increasing medicine दिया गया था, those people develop certain characteristics. उनके behavior के अंदर impulsivity आ गई. Impulsivity is when you do something or when you react without thinking of the consequences, right? I have a question. What is the question? Is this important that we repeat the behavior to release dopamine? Because if we only think about that memory again, can dopamine be released? Yes, it can be. Yes, it can be. ठीक है ना? So basically, the idea is that if you cannot do the behavior, you remember that behavior, right? But the idea is that your primary focus should involve the nucleus accumbens. So you're right, कि अगर हम चीज कर नहीं सकते, याद करके भी हम pleasure महसूस करते हैं. In some situations, yes. In some disorders, yes. Kleptomania के अंदर recalling about how you stole things won't give you pleasure. Pyromania के अंदर how you set fire on things may not give you pleasure. Gambling disorder के अंदर how you won the money may give you pleasure. So it differs to disorder. But if you want to be general about it, then yes, your question is correct. Okay? याद करने से भी dopamine हम निकाल सकते हैं. लेकिन hold on. यहाँ पे सारा जो डिसऑर्डर का नाम है ना, दैट्स इम्पल्स कंट्रोल डिसऑर्डर, ठीक है ना, ICD. एंड व्हेन यू लुक एट द डेफिनेशन गिवन बाय कैम्ब्रिज, ठीक है ना, ICD, ठीक है ना, इम्पल्स कंट्रोल डिसऑर्डर के अंदर बंदा कंपल्जन करता है, राइट? यू सी दिस वर्ड कंपल्जन, एंड वी हैव डिस्कस्ड दैट कंपल्जन इज ए बिहेवियरल कंपोनेंट. यहाँ पे लिखा हुआ भी है. So yeah, so in के argument के अंदर CIE says कि you know what, an impulse control disorder is all about the behavior. It's 100% about the behavior, right? We don't consider thoughts. Thoughts might be there, but as soon as the person does the behavior, that's when we consider it. So that's why within the dopamine theory, we're not gonna focus itna zyada on memory giving pleasure. We're gonna focus on the behavior that comes due to the memory that gives you the pleasure. So yeah. But outside CIE, you're correct. Common sense, generally, you're correct. Within CIE, you're going to have to focus more upon behavior. So anyways, Gruen experiment. People who took the dopamine increasing drug, right? After they took the drug, they developed some characteristics. Their decision making became fast. They become impulsive. Okay? They started to do things and उसके consequences भी नहीं सोचते. Now you're thinking, okay, yeah, this doesn't sound like a bad idea. This sounds good. They make better, faster decisions, and you know they react quick. But isn't this what people with impulse control disorders do? They're very, very impulsive, right? They do things without realizing consequences: stealing, firefighting, gambling, and they don't think twice about it. So what Rune argues is, okay, you know what? Increased amount of dopamine gives you, yeah, develops characteristics that people with impulse controllers have. So that is how Vroom concluded the increased amount of dopamine, it causes the person to have impulse control disorder type characteristics. तो जो नॉर्मल बंदा होगा जिसको impulse control disorder होगा उसका 100% उसके अंदर दिमाग में dopamine बहुत high levels पे आया होगा. But this question will always be there, will it apply to the normal population? Because he did this on people who have Parkinson, not normal people. So that's one research. Another research is given by Cummings and Burns. They particularly explain something for kleptomania, जो people चोरी करते हैं, who get addicted to stealing. Basically, they say that a person with kleptomania suffers from a reward deficiency syndrome. I'm repeating again. Person from kleptomania will suffer from a reward deficiency syndrome. So yeah, what is a reward deficiency syndrome? Basically, it means that the person who has kleptomania, right? He stole something, इसके दिमाग में dopamine निकलेगा. So yeah, coming a burn says कि जब वो अगली दफा चोरी करेगा ना, उसके दिमाग में इतना ज्यादा डोपामिन नहीं निकलेगा जितना पिछली दफा निकला था. अब वो बेचारा क्या करे? तो क्या करेगा? कमिंग्स एंड बर्न्स आर्ग्यू कि बिकॉज ऑफ रिवॉर्ड डेफिशिएंसी सिंड्रोम वो और ज्यादा चोरियां करेगा टू गेट दैट अमाउंट ऑफ डोपामिन दैट द पर्सन हैड बिफोर. तो फर्स्ट को टॉलरेंस की बात है. पिछली बार से ज्यादा चोरी करेगा टू फील द सेम अमाउंट ऑफ प्लेजर. So that happens because of reward deficiency syndrome. So it's a concept given by Cummings and Burns, not an experiment, right? This, however, is an experiment, right? It's a brief experiment. But our main thing is this. If you don't remember this, there's no point if you remember this one. So again, summarizing, you're gonna say that the biochemical explanation highlights the role of dopamine. It states that you know what dopamine gets released in the nucleus accumbens, which is the brain's pleasure center, which thereby a person will feel pleasure, right? Uh, the sooner the dopamine gets released, and the higher the amount of dopamine that gets released, the more pleasure the person will experience. Makes sense, common sense. So you're gonna say, so the next time when a person wants dopamine, they're gonna repeat the behavior that gave them the dopamine in the first place. So yeah, and that's the complete explanation. So the other question, these are all side researches. ठीक है, या original content के अंदर नहीं आएगा. For example, this stimulus reward center, तुम इसको न्यूक्लियस अकम्बेंस का नाम दे सकती हो, right? ठीक है. And when you state the entire mechanism, right, you're going to apply that to one disorder. For example, how will a person who has gambling disorder have it applied on them? You're going to say a person with gambling disorder will have dopamine released in the pleasure center when they gamble. So the next time they want the dopamine to get released, they will gamble again. One simple and description. That's it. इतना ज्यादा इसमें कोई वो नहीं है. ठीक है ना? जैसे ये again, main thing is you write the name dopamine. Main thing is that you write something about pleasure, you write something about the pleasure center, and the main thing is you apply it on a disorder. Pyromania ko apply karo, gambling disorder ko apply karo, kleptomania ko apply karo. That's it. That's gonna be your entire summary of the biochemical explanation of dopamine. So obviously, is it nature or nurture, right? You can, oddly enough, you can say two things about it. If you look at the dopamine aspect, it's a biochemical, definitely nature-based, right? Chemical. But if you are gonna focus upon the memory being formed, then that's nurture. Because originally, when the memories ke saath paida to nahi hota na. He develops memory. So it can be both. Depends upon what you're gonna focus. Is it individual or situational? It's completely individual, because is going to happen within the individual's brain. It's going to happen within the individual's pleasure center, right? So it's completely individual. Individual. Is it free will deterministic? It is completely gonna be deterministic. It is not gonna be in the person's control that dopamine nahi निकलेगा, right? जब भी pleasurable activity करेगा, उसका dopamine दिमाग में निकलेगा. There is no way he can say कि I want to do something fun, but dopamine doesn't get released. It's always going to get released, and that mechanism is not in the person's control. So it is deterministic. It's not free will. It's not in the person's hand. Okay, individual. Is it reductionist holistic? Is it is it considering multiple perspective? No, it's only considering dopamine explanation. Nothing of thoughts, no emotions involved, no behavior component involved. Just dopamine के बारे में बात करता है. It ignores everything else. So in that regard, it is reductionist. One more point for individual situational, that it's also going to be individual, because this nucleus accumbens ko pura mechanism, the pathway, right? That pathway is going to differ to one person to one person. Because हर person का जो biological composition होता है वो अलग होता है, right? So that way the dopamine chemical might क्या कहते हैं work in a different manner within one person, and work in a different manner in another person. किस तरह quantity किसी में ज़्यादा होगी, quantity किसी में कम होगी. As in two people sitting in a roller coaster, right? किसी के दिमाग के अंदर ज़्यादा डोपामिन निकल रहा होगा, किसी के दिमाग के अंदर कम डोपामिन निकल रहा होगा because of individual differences. Situation भले same रखो. So that's going to be one more point for individual versus situational. This is a scientific approach, right? You can test it, you can analyze it, you can prove that dopamine exists using scientific instruments. So it is very scientific, and this is objective. No one can debate that dopamine doesn't exist. This is there, it is proven, so it's objective rather than subjective. There is no point of arguing culture bias. You know what, brain chemicals don't get influenced by cultures. So regarding the first explanation, is it clear here, or you want me to go through anything again? All right, Zara has answered. What about everyone else? You guys, clear? Fatma, kya scene hai? All right. So that's one cause down. We have two more to go. Now we have the behavioral aspect or the behavior theory of why impulse control disorder happens. Uh, if you remember, kya kehte hain, classical conditioning in the phobia explanation, right? Laboratory experiment था. ठीक है, that's also behavioral explanation. अगर OCD के अंदर तुम्हें वो याद होगा, negative reinforcement वाला, तो ये उस वो operant conditioning के अंदर आता है. And this is positive reinforcement, which also comes under operant conditioning. So within your chapter, there are three chapters जहाँ पे behavior explanations आ रही होगी. Negative reinforcement OCD के अंदर है, classical conditioning phobia के अंदर है, and positive reinforcement इस chapter के अंदर है, impulse control disorder. So please make a note of that. ठीक है. Operant conditioning. Again, if you want to recap what is operant conditioning, it's learning based on outcome. If you get something good at the end of doing something, you're going to do that behavior again. If you get rewarded for doing something, you're going to do that again. But if you do get some negative consequences, you're not going to do that again, simply put. So this explanation can apply to all three disorders. Pyromania, kleptomania, gambling disorder. When a person gambles, when a person sets fire, when a person steals, they will feel rewarded because उनके दिमाग के अंदर pleasure, dopamine निकलेगा, or they'll feel pleasure in general. So the general rule is that they want to repeat that behavior again to get the pleasure, right? Same thing. But let's suppose वो बंदा आग लगा रहा है या चोरी कर रहा है या gambling कर रहा है, and he gets arrested for it, yeah, he gets injured. So chances are he's not going to do that again. Okay, simply put. But this doesn't apply to gambling disorder 100%. The rule is that if you get something good happen to you, outcome अच्छा है, you want to do that again. Outcome बुरा है, you won't want to do that again. But gambling के अंदर you don't always win, right? Gambling के अंदर you lose sometimes. So why doesn't the person stop gambling? He's getting punished again and again and again. Why isn't he going to stop gambling? So this is where your reason comes in. You're going to say, okay, you know what? Some behaviors have fixed ratio schedules, and some behaviors, I have a question. What is that? To recoup losses, yes, but ये तो तुम्हारा जो reason होगा, that's not going to fall within the behavioral domains. उनका कोई अलग vocabulary होता है इसके लिए. So you're going to say that some behavior have fixed ratio schedules and some behavior have variable ratio schedules. If you want to know what that is, fixed ratio schedule का मतलब है it is 100% guaranteed कि तुम्हारे इतने behavior बाद ये reward मिलेगा. Example चाहिए तो बता सकता हूँ. Salary, जो fixed salary होती है, तुम इतने दिन कंपनी जाओगे, तुम्हें महीने के आखिरी में salary मिलेगी. This is fixed, guaranteed 100%. पायरोमीनिया के बारे में बात करेंगे. वो बंदा आग लगाएगा, उसको पता है कि आग लगाने पे मुझे 100% pleasure मिलेगा. Kleptomania, the moment I steal, I'm gonna get a reward 100%. Like the pigeon experiment, yes. Now the other guys will say, what pigeon experiment? is a very famous experiment by Thorndike, ठीक है ना, पिंजरे केज के अंदर पिजन को बंद रखता है एंड वो पिजन को एक बटन दबाना होता है, राइट, एंड बटन दबाने से उसका नाम बीज गिरता है. सो मतलब पिजन डिस्कवर जब भी बटन दबाएगा ना उसके सामने बीज निकलेगा, फिक्स्ड 100% गारंटीड, बटन दबाने पे बीज निकल के आता है. एंड दैट्स हाउ द पिजन लर्न टू प्रेस द बटन अगेन एंड अगेन अगेन. ये गैमलिन डिसऑर्डर को अप्लाई नहीं होता. गैमलिन डिसऑर्डर के अंदर वेरिएबल रेशियो शेड्यूल आता है. वेरिएबल रेशियो शेड्यूल क्या मतलब है? इट्स नॉट गारंटीड कि तुम्हारे पास प्लेजर कब आएगा. इट इज देयर, प्लेजर और रिवॉर्ड वहां पे मौजूद है, इट्स नॉट एब्सेंट, बट कब आएगा ये नहीं पता. सो द पर्सन विद गैम्बलिंग डिसऑर्डर, बिकॉज ऑफ ही व्हेन ही डज नॉट नो कि रिवॉर्ड कब आएगा, he will keep doing it again and again and again जब तक रिवॉर्ड नहीं आएगा. रीजन बीइंग, इसके दिमाग में क्या रिस्पॉन्स होगा, क्या पता आ जाए, क्या पता आ जाए, क्या पता आ जाए, क्या पता आ जाए, राइट. सो this occurs in lottery. Lottery के अंदर explanation हो सकती है. This occurs in gambling. This occurs in lucky draw, right? Anything that does not have 100% fixed guaranteed outcome. Outcome है guaranteed है लेकिन fixed guaranteed नहीं है, उसको हम variable ratio schedule के अंदर ला सकते हैं. So variable ratio schedule is going to be used to explain the gambling disorder. Fixed ratio is going to be used to explain kleptomania and pyromania. So other words, gambling disorder के अंदर when he wins, so he wins. So you know, when if he loses, if he have a financial loss, right? He won't quit. He won't quit. He'll still keep doing it again and again and then again. उसको लगेगा कि क्या पता किसी भी attempt में I'm gonna win again. So that's why he does not know किस attempt में इसका लग जाएगा, तो जब भी वो gambling करेगा ज़्यादा. So in other words, ठीक है ना, both set of people, gambling disorder wale and kleptomania fire and pyromania wale people will be rewarded. फर्क ये होता है gambling disorder वाले को पता नहीं होता कि कब आएगा. That's why he keeps doing it despite the punishment. So in other words, shorter form में जो बोलना होगा तो तुम ये बोलोगी, operant conditioning, to be more exact, positive reinforcement explains why a person develops impulse control disorder. Uh, for example, if a person who sets fire, or if a person who steals, right? When they get pleasure, right, they want the pleasure again, so they will repeat that pleasure. But gambling disorder people have variable ratio schedules, so they don't know when they will experience that pleasure. So despite suffering losses, they will keep gambling again and again and again, expecting to win it anytime. Or expecting to win this time, or expecting to have a favorable outcome, right? क्या कहते हैं, or expecting to have a favorable outcome happen to them within those particular sets of behaviors. So yeah, so that's gonna be your explanation. इन्होंने variable ratio, fixed ratio schedule vocabulary इस्तेमाल नहीं किया. They just said that you know what, they use schedules. You can be more precise by saying these words, so you can impress the examiner, right? But that's it. This is gonna be your summary taken out. If you write anything less than this, you're in trouble. If you write something more than this, right, instead of operant conditioning, तुम positive reinforcement का exact इस्तेमाल कर दो. Instead of schedules, you write variable and fixed ratio schedules. Then you are good to go. If you be general, you're not gonna get any marks. So yeah, so using this reason of why impulse disorder, control disorder happens, we can say, okay, you know what, this is completely nurture based, because again, this is a behavioral theory. इसके अंदर बंदा सीखता है, right? This is not naturally ingrained in a person. यहाँ पे बंदा सीख रहा होगा. क्योंकि please remember, what जो भी behavioral theory होते हैं ना, positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, classical conditioning, उसके अंदर हमेशा learning इस्तेमाल होगी, and learning का मतलब nurture होगा. So the person learns to do that behavior again based on a favorable outcome. That's the argument. So it's nurture. Is it individual situational? It is situational in the sense that, you know what, it depends on the outcome. If you give a negative outcome to a person, they won't do it again. If you give a favorable outcome to a person, they will do it again. So it depends on the outcome, largely in general, right? It depends on the outcome. So reward is what makes the people go at it. Punishment is what makes the people stop. So it depends on outcome. That's why situational, individual situational, deterministic versus free will. All right, deterministic versus free will. यहाँ पे किस तरह apply होगा? See, the people who give this theory, चाहे वो classic conditioning का हो, negative reinforcement का हो, या positive reinforcement का हो, they come from a school of thought known as the behavioral psychology. Happens in the 1920s, right, when psychology was new. So cognitive psychology or the thought process part of psychology came around 1960s or 70s. So उस जमाने में thought process के बारे में कोई बात ही नहीं करता था. It did not exist. So people who invented the behavioral school of thought says, you know what, a person is just like a machine. They will respond to whatever you do to them. If you do good to them, they'll keep doing that behavior again. If you be bad to them, they won't do that behavior again. And this is 100% guaranteed. The person has no choice कि तुम उसका अच्छा करो और वो behavior बंद करना कर दे. Or the person has no choice कि तुम उससे बुरा करो, punish करो और बंदा फिर से दोबारा behavior करे. Behavioral school of thought वाले people argue that person cannot freely choose के punishment के बाद भी वो behavior दोबारा करेगा. Punishment मिल गई, अब वो behavior आइंदा नहीं करेगा. That's 100% guaranteed. It's like a mathematical equation. So a person does not have free will to go against this principle. So that's why it is going to be deterministic. I know it doesn't make sense, but us zaman mein did, just because they said that thought process don't exist. Person like a passive machine. So it is deterministic in that sense. Is it reductionist? Yes, it is. Does not consider thought processes. Only focuses on behavior, right? Does not consider biological aspects. Only focuses on behavior. तुम कहोगे यहाँ पे dopamine लिखा हुआ है, या लिखा हुआ है, मैं यहाँ पे हटा भी सकता हूँ, right? Because we just want to focus on pleasure. और pleasure किसी भी तरीके से आ सकता है. So it does not consider biological aspect, does not consider emotions, does not consider thoughts, only focuses on positive reinforcement, nothing else. आगे पीछे कुछ भी नहीं. So it is reductionist, in my view. They missed out on a lot of things they could have considered, but they didn't. उसके अलावा I don't think culture bias apply होगा, क्योंकि this concept may be applicable in every single culture. यहाँ पे gambling disorder, kleptomania, pyromania आता होगा. So it is present regardless of culture. Is it objective? Yes. Reason being, positive reinforcement is again a behavioral explanation, and you can see behavior, right? You can actually see a behavior being performed, and anything you can see, touch, smell, hear is objective. It's there. Thought process you cannot see, so it's subjective. Emotion you cannot see, subjective. Behavior you can see, तो objective होगा, लेकिन ये scientific नहीं है. क्योंकि you cannot study behavior using scientific instruments, right? कोई instrument बना नहीं है तो specifically study behavior. You can see it objective, but you cannot study it, so it's not scientific. I hope you understand the difference. So it is objective, but not scientific. So that's gonna be for positive reinforcement. Do you guys have any questions about it? Or would you like me to repeat anything again to clarify the concept? Yeah, is everyone on the same page so we can hum aage badhenge? Otherwise, what about Milgram? Milgram, electric shock, Milgram. What about Milgram? क्या कहना चाह रहे Milgram के बारे में? The people continue to receive shocks. Okay, say it. I agree, but still answer. All right. So she says, you know what? Milgram के experiment के अंदर. Okay. People received shock for giving the wrong answer. You know this, right? People received shock for they didn't get the shock for telling the right answer. They got the shock. So basically, you punish them for giving the wrong answer, and you did not punish them for giving the right answer. So basically, you gave them punishment for doing bad, but you did not give them anything for doing good. The punishment to me. So the idea is that they might make an effort to remember things more correctly. दूसरी बात है कि Milgram experiment will not apply that much. At the end, Milgram used a recording. असल बंदे को shock नहीं मिल जाता, right? So a person who we thought was getting shocked was actually recording in the other room. So there was no real actual participants being shocked. as the learner, so that's why it may not be applicable for Milgram. Does that answer your question, Halima? All right. Zoom meeting पे 1 minute रहता तो I'm gonna restart this meeting again and I'm gonna send you the link again so we can have a class. तो मैं वहाँ पे link दोबारा भेज रहा हूँ.